with the motivation why it is important, but now I can leave out because I think you are convinced that it improves PDFs quite dramatically, and that we really need, and more especially that we need better tagging for math, yeah? Because math gets really wrong if there is no MathML. The main talk is about the tagging MathML, but I want to start with a few other changes in the tag PDF project, so that announcements or improvements that are perhaps also of interest. It's only a bit short. The first topic is about that we are consolidating currently the interface. Tag PDF started as a package, someone around 2018 or something like this, and if you wanted to try out tagging with it, you had to load the package and you had to activate it and you had to use some low-level commands. The next step, then, when we started really with the project, we invented the document metadata command as a trigger command which is used at the beginning of a document to show this document wants to use new code, and there we can also add document settings, but this is really, it shows new code. At the beginning it didn't do much on itself, it only offered a keyword interface, and for example the PDF management had to be loaded first before you could do anything with it, so that was before. The next step was that we integrated at first new code into the document metadata, the PDF management, so you no longer had to load it, it was loaded automatically. And we started with various phases which loaded additional code developed during the tagging project. Here, for example, phase 3. But it's for test phase code, so it was really meant for the development, trying out new code, allowing user to load it, to test it, give feedback, and go to the next step. Then we had more modules because we added support for titles and for math and table. The list got a bit long, and so long that I started to forget which one you need. And so we got, yeah, and then I always had to tell someone, oh, you forgot this module and you forgot this one. So we invented the latest key, which loaded everything. So always get the newest stuff. And now the next step that we are doing is that we are kitting this test phase mode. So we think the interface is already quite nice and it works, actually, as you have seen, quite well. And so now we are no longer using test phase, so instead we have now a tagging key. And I think this key will stay. This key will load the new code. So the current status here is now, with the current latest release, if you use document metadata at the beginning without key, then it will load the PDF management. It sets the PDF version to 0 because we think this PDF version is much better for tagging. And it sets the font encoding default from OT1 to T1, 2.1. Sorry, with PDF LaTeX. I don't think anyone noticed this, but we thought it was time to kit OT1 because it has really some problems. If you use tagging equal off, then it will additionally load all the tagging support code, all the new code that we have for tagging. So similar to the test phase equal latest key. It does more or less the same, but it doesn't activate tagging. If you use tagging equal on, then it will activate tagging additionally. That's a state that you get with the current LaTeX. The next release is in November. We'll the next step. There, if you use document method without a key, it will load all this new code. Not only the PDF management, but also all the new code. So it will be quite similar, tagging equal of or tagging without document metadata without argument will more or less be the same. With tagging on, you activate tagging. As there are people around who use document metadata to get only the PDF management code, which allows you to add XMP metadata and set PDF standards and similar, we are now providing a dedicated package that people can use instead of using document metadata. This package can be loaded inside classes, but at best it is loaded as early as possible. The later you load, the more problems you get, because PDF version, for example, must be set rather early in the document. You can always test this new interfaces on this new version if you use LaTeX dev. We released the dev version last week, and since then this is online and for testing, and I hope that you really test it, because it's a rather big change, because now document metadata loads a large amount of new code, much more than before, and so please test and report back errors. Okay, that was an interface. The next point is that we have released, or Joseph has released, a new class called LaTeX Talk, which allows you to create accessible text presentations. Beamer, the Beamer class used mostly by most people, is simply not accessible, and it has so many problems. We try to add tagging support, but it's really, really hard there, and so we decided to write a new class. If you look at the slides of my talk, and you can look at the tagging, this slide is tagged. There are slides. We are not yet sure if all the tagging is really good for users. We are waiting feedback, but we are really hoping. This class is so new that 6 hours before I uploaded the slides, I still hadn't decided if I write now on Citan or soon on Citan. So, it got. The class requires LaTeX dev currently, because it needs all the code and it needs all the definitions. So you can only try it out with the newest dev version or with the next LaTeX release. And it requires naturally the new code, and so a document meta declaration before your document. It will test for it and fail if you don't have this. Third short announcement is there's a new tool on Citan called Show PDF Text. It's a command line application that you have in Tech Live. You can call it on every PDF, and then it will show you the PDF text in this document. In this case, I'm using it with option XML. To get an XML output, there's another tree view that you can do instead, but XML is typically quite nice. For example, I made it on this, it's now a bit small probably, perhaps you can everything see it. It's at start. It shows you the XML structure of the tree, including some of the content. Here, for example, is the text status of the LaTeX project. It doesn't show every content. You can't show images or something like this. They will put question marks or say here's an image. But it shows you the structure. It shows you that I have a section, a part, a title, and so on. The tagging structure of the tagging, including mass and everything. Quite useful if you really start to create tag PDF. Now let us get to the main question on tagging of mass, which Frank has already said quite a lot of stuff. When I started somewhere in 2018, 2019, I wrote in the tag PDF documentation, tagging of mass is a problem. I had seen some examples which partly added structure elements around the mass and with lots of actual text, and an alternative text, and it looked so that is quite unusual. At first, there were no tool that really show what it does, and the main problem that I couldn't see that any author would ever get into the trouble to mark up a LaTeX source in this way. This was impossible. It was quite clear that we need something to get MathML inside, and that this MathML is then handled by a tool like now Mathcat, who knows how to read MathML. That's not our job to tell in every detail how this should be read. Yeah, that's cannot be the so it's not possible, but how it is done. Could see in Frank's talk that this is not only a question about what should LaTeX do. Naturally, LaTeX, as a producer of PDF, has somehow to add some MathML. But once the MathML is there, the reader must do something with the MathML, must, for example, pass it to the assistive technology. Currently, this is only partly working. Foxit add pass MathML if you put it in as an associated file embedded in the PDF. And Adobe pass it on if you put it in with structure elements. So if you put both in, then both can use it. But what we can do, we can put it twice. We hope in both cases that both will adjust. Both are working on their missing parts. So I hope this will change in the future. And other PDF viewer, we naturally will have to convince them to add support for this too. And then naturally the screen reader, when he gets the MathML, must do something with it. This now works since June this year. Now the newest NVDA version takes the MathML and passes it, embeds, uses a Mathcat library to read it. And now we have actually a workflow demonstrated by Frank that can demonstrate that math can be read in a sensible way. But this since June, so we are new. Where are the problems? I spoke tagging with math, but actually it's about tagging with MathML. This requires PDF 2.0 because PDF 1.7 views math as a graphic where you put the description above. That's not usable, not really, not for a complex math. So PDF 1.7 is not really good for math. We need MathML. Now PDF 2.0 introduced MathML, and I have here shown you the specification. And I should say this is not a small part of the specification. This is basically everything that PDF 2.0 says about MathML. There's not more in it. It doesn't say. We know there's a namespace. You can use the MathML names as structure elements. That's the first. And you can have if you use it, it should have the MathML namespace, okay? That's a requirement. And it says a bit something about if you use an associated file, then it should have a certain relationship. But it doesn't really say much more about how is MathML used in connection with other math structure elements. So the spec is a bit vague. The UA specification has not much more details. There are 2 sentences about math, but it at least says you should use MathML, which is already good. But so we had actually to find out quite a lot of details ourselves, or by discussing with the PDF organization what this means, or by discussion with the implementation. One problem here is that PDF didn't really realize MathML is an XML language, but PDF is not. But somehow they thought, if you say you can use MathML, it looks similar, both are somehow trees, So it should be easy to use the one in the other. But for example, a question that is not really clear, MathML has attributes which are in a known namespace, and the PDF actually requires that such attributes are in the MathML namespace. And so if you try an interpretation from the one to the other, what you do with the namespace, drop it, or use another namespace, so to get some structure and some documentation, mostly David made a long document how we should interpret MathML in connection if we go from PDF to XML. There's a long document for everyone interested in XML and XML interpretation. Look at it, interesting. It is used this, in the show PDF text, where we had to decide when we export to XML what we do with the PDF structure which isn't XML. How do we interpret PDF properties and PDF attributes when we are going to XML? Now let's look at some example. I just want to point out one of the problems, some of the problems you came to math. Here a short example with a cases environment. And we have a line, we have a cases. Here is an absolute x to say the absolute number. Inside math, we have sometimes nested text with, again, nested math. So, oops. This is the text. It should be marked with PDF structure elements. And the nested math inside is then again XML. And so we have really to develop solutions. What does this mean and how will Mascot handle this? There can be references with links inside math, which you have to handle too, because these references, in this case, the reference stays inside the math, simply for the example. But reference could go to somewhere else in the document. And you have to handle this too when thinking MathML and PDF. If you want to tag math with associated file. An associated file means you create a MathML version of the equation and you embed this into the PDF, and then you attach this PDF to the structure element. As I said, Foxit can handle this type of MathML. To do this, you use document metadata tagging equal on. You should at best use Unicode Math, because really math tagging works the best with Unicode Math. You should at best use Lua LaTeX, because really math tagging works best with Lua LaTeX. And then you have this already will produce a MathML with a Lua ML package. It will then embed the resulting MathML. If you want, you can correct the MathML if it's wrong. You can extend it. And then the code will do embedded and worklic. That is the default mode that we are currently using, that MathML is embedded with associated file. Cross-references and are not quite clear. And the problem with associated file, they are easier to create and to manipulate, but you cannot really navigate through the math. Because there is no synchronization between the PDF and the MathML file. There is a MathML file at the beginning of the math, and you only know there at the beginning is the MathML, and you don't know which part of the MathML belong to which part in the PDF. The other option to add MathML is with structure elements, which are inside the PDF. For this, you have to add a tagging setup command, which say use MathML structure elements. As I said, you can also use both. Then you have to say use also MathML RF, and then you get both. And this creates then MathML structure elements. It's more challenging because it has to manipulate the M list and the mass list, and embedding structure elements is not so trivial, so not so many environments. There can be more errors, but it will in the end allow you to navigate with the mass and to synchronize some subparts of the mass with the actually MathML. As structure elements are known to since a long time, more readers that actually already pass structure elements to a T will also pass the MathML structure elements. They won't know them, perhaps, because they have no idea of PDF to 0, but they will probably pass them on. So there are more chances that this works with more readers than the associated file method. Nested math and so on, there are still work to do. Last topic here, I want to mention intents. Frank has already said something about it. We want to try. We have already started, but must need some support. What is intended here? I had the apps command, and the apps command should say something like that is meant to be an absolute value. So the MathML should contain, an apps should contain apps. You can define this, we have command for this, but here really you need to redefine commands. If you want to have an intent, you have to redefine them so that they add the intent. The intent, the system of equation that you heard when you wrote the alignment, this is because we already add automatically intent, an intent system of equation around the line. We also add intents around the label, which was read very well. I don't know if you have really realized, but it said system of equations, row 1 with label to 1 from the end, and then it started. And this is because from our tagging with the intent, which tells Muscat, here is a label. That was made together with the author of Muscat, so that labels are really read in a way. So intents are really important because they improve the reading. Also, someone just mentioned that there was a nice pause between the two steps of the alignments. And the pause is inserted through an intent. There's really an intent, say, make a pause here. And stop a bit so that you can read it. So intents are really important, and they will be done much more. We will try to improve many of them commands so that intents are inserted everywhere. At the beginning, the PDF specification, the ones say where it's not vague, it say use MathML 3. Well, we won't do this. We will use MathML core and not MathML 3, and because we want intents. So that won't do that. But intents are work in progress. I thank you for your attention.
Any questions?
Hello, thanks, Plato. It was very good. I'm wondering about the document metadata command that you added, and you said you're pretty happy with the interface, and that will probably stay that way.
Could you say louder?
Yeah, sorry. You said that you were pretty happy with the interface you've settled on with document metadata, and then you had the tagging equals on there.
Yeah.
I'm guessing my question is, could we get to a point where you don't even need that command, you just turn it on by default? Or maybe the related question is, bad tagging worse than no tagging? Like, do we need to be confident to tag the whole thing?
There are two questions here. The question is, should tagging equal on be the default or tagging equal off? That is something that will be to be discussed. Perhaps at some time tagging equal on will be the default, and if you don't want it, you will have to switch it off. That is, currently we allow tagging, perhaps makes errors, and perhaps it's if someone has simply document metadata, he should have the choice to switch it really on. The other question is if we need the document metadata command for itself. This is quite clear we need it because it loads lots of new code. And we cannot simply load this new code on all old documents, because it changes things. It changes spacing, it changes the handling of some environments. It is not compatible with quite a lot of packages yet, even if it's compatible with So really, this is like the switch from LaTeX to 9 to LaTeX to E, where a new command from document style to document class were introduced so that people who didn't want to switch had the chance to stay in the old system. This LaTeX has some backward compatibility, and so we need people to have the chance to say, no, I don't want this. So the new code will always need this document metadata command. It has also it is useful because you want to set standards and PDF version and so on at the beginning of the document, and at some time you will also be able to set the author or the title in this place, so that really the main document metadata are at the beginning of your document.
I have one question from the chat and one question from me. From the chat, Werner Lemberg asks, what is the time horizon of the tagging development?
Time,
yes. When?
Oh, well, how should I? That depends, on many stuff.
Well, I mean, the time horizon is that we have now valid tagging possibilities already today, with a restriction of usable of 600 packages and not every class. But if you restrict yourself, you get full tagging support today. It is still under development, meaning that the inner stuff is going to change, but for standard documents that only use these 600 packages, you have tagging if you want it. Now, when are we going to be finished? That will certainly be more than, really finished more than 2 years. If not more, it depends a little bit on, we need to be ending up with basically every important package being tagging aware. And important means that it is used by a large fraction of people. And then we can hope that new packages start to be wanting to be tagging aware if everybody needs tagging. By now, we have requirements all over the world that accessibility has to be there. So the need is growing. And you can serve the need now, but only with a restricted set of LaTeX documents.
The user actually clarified that he meant the basics like MathML support rather than all the packages. So he basically asked about MathML.
The MathML, this is we showed it. This is actually already working.
Yeah.
You will probably still get errors with the one or the other command or with the one or the other math package who does current definitions, and there will be improvement. But the core MathML and the ASM, I think I tagged the whole AMS math documentation And with the exception of one curious stuff, it compiles and is tagged. Yeah, so we have a large amount of MathML working. Complex stuff like diagrams or so, they are even more because how to read them and how to make them. But the core RMS math is working.
And a question from me, if allowed. As a package and class writer, what is the best way to check whether document metadata is in the user document? So when I start my class, I want to understand whether the user started document metadata. Is there a switch?
That is the reason why we now start to load all the code. Before, it was very difficult for a class also to understand which code was loaded, because document metadata only loaded PDF management, and then people could use various phases and various combinations of modules, and a class also had no good chance to know what is going on. Now that we are loading everything, you can test first. You only need to test if document metadata together with is the format new enough. So if you test for the combination of document meta and format, then you know this new code is there. And test of tagging is active or not is something that you actually shouldn't do, because you should use tagging sockets and they should switch on or switch off depending if tagging is there or not.
What is a package level command?
If document metadata TF.
Thank you.
Well, but ask me if you want. And you can also force document metadata. This is what LaTeX talk is doing. There's a command, needs document metadata, and if it's not there, it will error. Yeah? It will tell you this document needs document metadata. So now, from now on, from the next release on, package and class authors can reliably test is new code there or new code there. It will still change a new code. Yeah, new code means something that changes. So do not expect everything to stay. Yeah. So test. And,
Any more questions? Thank you, Ulrike.